Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, May 5th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 summer in the world. Hell, it's got to be Cinco de Mayo everywhere in the world. That's right, it's Cinco de Mayo today, and I am in South Florida, where Cinco de Mayo is in full swing. I've been walking down the boardwalk here in Hollywood Beach, Florida. They've got the Cinco de Mayo signs out, all sorts of specials on Coronas and margaritas. But I've been a good boy, been staying completely alcohol-free for the day so we can get our show in because we've got a jam-packed show for today. My apologies for missing yesterday's show. No, it wasn't because I was out celebrating Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. No, it was because we had a torrential monsoon-like rain all day here in South Florida, and the internet was spotty as hell. I don't know what they're using here at this historic Hollywood Beach resort, but it was not reliable, and rather than put you through all that and put myself through the headache, I just took the day off and camped out in the room. But a lot of news going down over these past couple of days that we've got to get to. So coming up, we've got all sorts of great segments for you. We're going to take a look in our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment at the latest news that the California Adult Use of Marijuana Act is going to make the ballot. They've got well over the number of signatures that they need, and there's something like 300,000 that they need. They've got 600,000 signatures at this point, so it looks pretty reliable here that we are going to have legalization on the ballot in California. So, yes, it's great news out of the state of California. So joining us in our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment, we're going to be speaking with California cop Kyle Kazan, who's going to tell you why law enforcement officers like himself are getting behind this Adult Use of Marijuana Act and why they think we need to legalize marijuana. Also coming up on the show today, we'll have time for a radical rant where I'll give you my opinion on the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, which can be summed up as the following. If you're opposing the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, you're helping Kevin Sabet. And you know what I think about that. So we'll get to that in time for the Radical Rant. Also, we'll take a look behind the headlines today where in the state of Michigan, they're once again another one of these states that is trying to set up a per se DUID stoned driving limit, which we will explain why that's impossible when we get to behind the headlines. But first, we've got the Cannabis Radio News. And like I said, lots of stories going down over the past couple of days. We'll break down that Adult Use of Marijuana Act signature gathering. Also, another drug law change in California you may not have heard about. We'll take you to Dover, New Hampshire, where medical marijuana is expanding. Oklahoma and Alabama both expanding their cannabidiol oil bills. We've got news from the latest changes to the medical marijuana bill winding through the Ohio legislature. In Salem, Oregon, the news coming down on the expansion of our early sales program for marijuana. We've also got news from Denver, Colorado on organic certification of marijuana products. A very shocking turn in that story. Also, stay tuned for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio will take your calls at 971-533-7111. We've also got a few other stories to cover, including, considering it is Cinco de Mayo, we'll take a look at a story from Leafly on 6 cannabis strains with Mexican heritage that you need for Cinco de Mayo. Also, speaking of Latin America, Brazil has approved real scientific hemp oil as a cancer treatment. We'll get into the details of that when we return. But first, the Cannabis Radio News right after this 2-minute break. I'm Radical Russ, live from Hollywood, Florida.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Next to THC and CBD, you can now add CBR to your cannabis vernacular. CBR as in cannabisradio.com.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
CannabisRadio.com keeps you in the know Monday through Friday on air and on demand with Cannabis Radio News, presented with the definitive worldwide news source, the Associated Press. Stay informed with exclusive news on all things cannabis. Cannabis Radio News, live weeknights at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, during the Russ Belville Show, or download the daily podcast exclusively on CannabisRadio.com, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. When breaking news happens in the cannabis industry, Cannabis Radio News delivers the details first.
The Russ Belville Show. Chat is for friends 18 and older. We expect our chat to be civil, mature, and free from excessive profanity. If you don't like these rules, there are approximately 6 billion other chat rooms with lower standards that you can visit.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at cannabisradio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Thursday, May 5th, 2016. San Francisco, California. Backers of a 2016 California marijuana legalization initiative say they have collected enough signatures for the measure to qualify for the California ballot this November. A coalition that includes former Facebook President Sean Parker and backed by Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and the nation's leading marijuana advocacy groups says it has collected 600,000 signatures, much more than the 365,000 needed, well ahead of the July 5th deadline. Newsom, a Democratic candidate for governor in 2018, and other supporters of the ballot measure known as the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, plan to launch the official campaign Wednesday in San Francisco. The measure would allow possession of 1 ounce of marijuana and cultivation of 6 marijuana plants for adults 21 and older. The initiative would also place a 15% tax on retail sales of the drug. Sacramento, California. California Governor Jerry Brown has signed a bill raising the tobacco smoking age from 18 to 21. Anti-smoking advocates point to data showing a great reduction in teen smoking following the strict enforcement of the age 18 limit nationwide. Now advocates are calling for a nationwide raise in the tobacco age to 21. California becomes the second state to do so, following Hawaii's example a few months ago. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Sooner State is set to expand its 2014 program allowing for the limited use of cannabidiol oil for medical purposes. The House has approved and sent to Governor Mary Fallin a bill that removes the age limit on what had been strictly pediatric uses of the cannabis oil low in THC. In addition to allowing adult use, the bill expands the program to include spasticity due to multiple sclerosis, paraplegia, and symptoms of chronic wasting disease. Montgomery, Alabama. Alabama Governor Robert Bentley has signed a bill expanding the Yellowhammer State's cannabidiol oil study law from 2014. The law will allow for medical treatment of cachexia or wasting syndrome, severe or chronic pain, severe nausea, seizures, severe and persistent muscle spasms, and any other condition that is severe and resistant to conventional medicine. The cannabidiol oil can be no more than 3% THC, and it must be acquired from out of state. Denver, Colorado. A Colorado proposal to certify organic marijuana has been rejected amid concerns the labels would imply pot is healthy. The bill, rejected in a legislative committee Tuesday, would have created a first-of-its-kind label for marijuana that had been produced without pesticides. The proposal failed 4-3 in a Senate committee. Some lawmakers said the labels could wrongly imply that marijuana is harmless. Salem, Oregon. Oregon is expanding its early sales program that allows adult marijuana consumers to shop at existing medical marijuana dispensaries until recreational shops are licensed and open. Since October of last year, adults have been allowed to purchase up to 7 grams of cannabis flower and 4 cannabis seedlings or seeds. Starting June 2nd, adults will now be able to purchase 1 edible with no more than 15 milligrams of THC, topical products of no more than 6% THC, and 1 pre-filled extract cartridge of no more than 1 gram of THC. Oregon also removed its 2-year residency requirement for commercial licensing. That licensing also begins on June 2nd. Columbus, Ohio. The Ohio House has revamped its proposed medical marijuana law to remove access to whole plant cannabis medicine. House Bill 523 has specified that marijuana would not be available to patients in a smokable form. Patients would also be forbidden from growing their own cannabis plants at home. Allowing doctors discretion to determine medical cannabis use has been replaced by a strict list of about 20 qualifying conditions. Extracts would be limited to 70% THC content. Positive benefits of the bill include protections for parental rights, reciprocity for other states with conditions as strict as Ohio's, a program to help needy patients get marijuana, and a requirement that 15% of all licenses are issued to people of color. Dover, New Hampshire. New Hampshire's second medical marijuana dispensary is opening in Dover. Temescal Wellness is scheduled to open Thursday. The first one, run by Sanctuary ATC, opens Saturday in Plymouth. Temescal Wellness is expected to receive certification for a second dispensary in Lebanon in a few weeks. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Thursday, May 5th, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Keep your cannabis cravings under control. Feed your mind with CannabisRadio.com.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we take a look at the state of Michigan, where Michigan Live reports Marijuana debate goes mobile as magic number for driving while stoned is sought. This is something that legislatures all across the country are trying to tackle here. It's because they recognize that marijuana legalization is happening. It's going to happen in the next few years, no matter where you live. And so now they're panicked. Now they're freaking out with the idea of, oh my God, once we legalize, there'll be people smoking pot and driving. As if legalization invents cars and marijuana. Folks, it does not. People out there have been smoking marijuana for decades. They've been driving for decades. We have yet to see the carnage. This stoned mayhem on the freeways that they keep trying to defend us from is a shibboleth. It does not exist. It's a fantasy from their fevered imaginations of the worst case scenario that can happen for marijuana legalization. Now, the people pushing this will point to Washington State, which has established a 5 nanogram per se DUID limit. And that means if there's 5 nanograms of active THC in your system, we're not talking about the metabolites that you get caught on a piss test for weeks and weeks. We are talking about active THC in your system. 5 nanograms per milliliter of blood means you're automatically guilty of being too stoned to drive. Now, scientifically, this is complete bunk. And in fact, the State Representative Peter Lucido, a Republican from Shelby Township, has put together this bill to sponsor a study commission. He notes that the 5 nanogram number in Colorado and Washington were numbers that they, quote, pulled out of their derrieres, end quote. And he's absolutely right. See, the number of 5 nanograms got set when Washington's I-502 was looking to kind of soothe the nervous soccer mom and Eastern Washington types that were worried about the stone mayhem on the freeways by trying to portray that they were going to be strict and tough about stone driving. And where they got the number 5 nanograms is from certain studies that show over the vast population of cannabis consumers, over that population which gets into Rex, and of that subset of population for which we know their blood THC levels, there is an indication that at 5 nanograms, statistically speaking, you start to see more problems, impairment, Rex, and such. The only problem with that is you're taking the entire group of cannabis consumers. And as we know, cannabis is metabolized so differently by different people, and that the amount of 5 nanograms that a newbie might be at after smoking his first joint would make him far too impaired to drive a car. But someone like me, a 250-pound man who smokes marijuana every day throughout the day, I probably wake up at about 15, and I'm nowhere near being too impaired. So the spoiler alert for the Michigan legislature is you can go ahead and set up this study commission, and what you're going to find is there is no magic number. There is no number you can guarantee that 95% confidence interval, the people at that level are too impaired to drive. It's not like alcohol. And this is partially our fault because we've been saying, treat it like alcohol. So now they're saying, okay, well, where's the breathalyzer? But the problem is marijuana ain't alcohol. With alcohol, people that are at 0.08 or above, about 95% of them are too drunk to drive. It's very reliable in that respect. Cannabis just doesn't work that way. This is why when Oregon came out with its Measure 91, we resisted every entreaty to us to put a 5 nanogram limit in it. And there were a lot of people calling for it. And we resisted that. That was a deal breaker. But instead, we offered up that money from the pot tax sales would go to a study commission to try to determine what the magic number is. Because we know there is no magic number. Made them feel better, made the voters feel better. But we already know what the answer to that science is. There is no magic number. In fact, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in its cannabis safety data sheets, even says, quote, it is inadvisable to try to determine impairment based on body fluid concentrations alone. THC in the bloodstream is not a reliable indicator as to whether or not someone is impaired. And again, this is a solution in search of a problem because nobody has ever worried about a rash of stone drivers creating mayhem on the freeways. The joke is always that we're sitting at the stop sign waiting for it to turn green, isn't it? That we're driving 40 miles an hour on the freeway, right? We're not the dangerous drivers out there.
One wife, one God, that I can understand, but one wife, that is not civilized.
Well, happy 420 to our friends out there in Denver, Colorado. And yeah, there's just no way to come up with this stoned driving limit. And you know what, folks? We don't need it. Stoned driving has always been illegal. And believe it or not, people have been busted for it and convicted of it. There's a 90% conviction rate in such cases. So what else do they need?
From dabs to chivas, sativas to indicas, we roll out a whole concentrate of fresh new content every week. It's like going from the greenhouse to the dispensary. CannabisRadio.com.
Ganjapreneur.com, your guide to the cannabis business world. Ganjapreneur.com is a comprehensive resource for cannabis professionals and entrepreneurs. Download the Ganjapreneur app on your smartphone or tablet to catch up on cannabis industry news, scroll through our daily job listings, and learn about successful cannabis companies, executives, and investors. Ganjapreneur.com, helping ganjapreneurs grow.
I'm Radical Russ from the Russ Belville Show. Tennessee's Congressman Steve Cohen.
Well, if marijuana is a gateway drug, then kissing is a gateway activity to sexual addiction.
U.S. Representative Jared Polis.
Yes, we really have a growing group of representatives that support decriminalization.
It's the Russ Belville Show, the NPR of POT, weekdays live at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific, exclusively on CannabisRadio.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
I said, on this program, what do they want? My grandchildren and the monster. Did I scare you?
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Don't want to spend money on a night out, but don't know what to do other than watching TV or playing video games? Consider playing guitar, bass, banjo, or mandolin. The instrument will give you hours of entertainment with friends with minimal expense. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today in the Data Mines, we take a look at the latest on the Washington Post's Wonk blog entitled, So, Something Interesting Happens to Weed After It's Legal. It's written by Keith Humphreys, who's been studying marijuana and marijuana economics for years. He's a professor of psychiatry and mental health policy at Stanford University. And he takes a look at the data coming from Washington State, which legalized recreational cannabis in 2012. And 2 years ago began the recreational cannabis sales. And they have now found one very compelling piece of data from legalization. Legalized marijuana is getting very cheap very quickly. The data comes from Washington State's Liquor and Cannabis Board, aggregated by Steve Davenport of the Pardee Rand Graduate School and Jonathan Calkins, a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. We saw Jonathan Calkins at the New York Cannabis Science and Policy Summit just a couple of weeks ago. And they point out that when Washington State first legalized, there were some supply shortages. There wasn't enough growers, there wasn't enough retail outlets, and the price of marijuana actually went up. So in July 2014, when marijuana was first made legally available for sale, the retail prices were about $22.50 a gram. It was pretty expensive weed, $22.50, and they spiked as high as $25 a gram. Now what the researchers are finding is that prices are steadily falling at about 2% per month. And Davenport says if that trend holds, prices may fall 25% each year going forward. And the chart they provide here on Wonk Blog tells us that the price per gram retail now in Washington State, as of the most recent data, March of 2016, is averaging $9.32 a gram. We are down below $10 a gram in Washington State. And that's your averages, right? So you can find prices lower than that for sure. But $9.32. So at $10 a gram, you're talking about a $280 ounce if you bought it a gram at a time. But if you're buying in bulk, you're finding prices lower than $9.32 a gram. I've often pointed out the prices that I can find at Vancouver, Washington's Main Street Marijuana, where I can actually find half ounces of sun-grown marijuana at prices between $45 and $75 per half ounce. And keep in mind, when we're talking about Washington State, this is including 37% excise tax, the highest tax on marijuana in the nation, 37%, plus the state and local taxes, which can range from 7 and 9%, depending on where you're at. So even with all those taxes added in, I'm able to find half ounces for $45 to $75 of quality cannabis that is, above 20% THC. The wholesale prices have likewise plummeted. The wholesale prices hovered around $9 a gram. This is the price that the retail stores pay the growers. They're paying the growers at about $9 a gram. Now they're down to $2.99 a gram wholesale. $3 a gram, folks, wholesale. So at $3 a gram wholesale, you're talking about 60 and 24 is $84 an ounce wholesale prices in Washington State. So if you're curious as to why some people seem to be so vehemently against the legalization of marijuana, and they're people that like marijuana, you have to question how much of that is their own enlightened self-interest, is realizing that under legalization, with competition in the market and economy of scale and not having to hide your grow operations, that these growers now can produce massive amounts of cannabis and even at $3 a gram wholesale still make really good money. The legalization of marijuana is only doing the customer a huge favor in reducing the prices. And when I say the customer, I mean recreational or medical customer. If you listened to the news earlier and you heard about Ohio paring down its medical marijuana bill to not allow for smokable cannabis, to not allow for home grow, then you have to begin to realize that after Ohio, following Pennsylvania being similar, no home grow, no plant access, following Minnesota with the same situation, following New York with the same situation, it seems to me that the direction of medical marijuana is going to continue to go to this more restrictive, non-smoked, no plant access medical marijuana. So if patients want access to whole plant, and they want that access at the lowest prices, it seems paramount and obvious that they now need to get into the game. Now they need to get fully behind recreational legalization. Medical marijuana from this point forward leads to highly restrictive programs, no home grow, no plant access, no smokable cannabis, and eventually GW Pharmaceuticals' bottom line. You want access to whole plant cannabis as a medical patient? You want to be able to grow your own as a medical patient? It's time for you to get behind marijuana legalization, because that's the only route that's going to give people access to the whole plant, only route that's going to give people access to being able to cultivate their own. Continuing to try to separate cannabis consumers into arbitrary piles of who's healthy enough to leave alone and who's sick enough to put in a cage isn't going to work anymore. Now they've developed the ways of getting what they consider to be medical marijuana to people that eliminates all the yucky things they don't like about pot smokers. So now, you want whole plant smokable marijuana, you're just a pot smoker like the rest of us. Time to get behind legalization. When we come back, cops say legalize drugs. We got Kyle Kazan from California. We're going to talk about the Adult Use of Marijuana Act when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Legal to listen to all over the world. We're just not sure about France. CannabisRadio.com.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Russ Belville Show, providing dictionaries to drug czars since 2009.
Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: cops say legalize drugs.
Welcome back, everyone. 32 after the hour. Joining us here for our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment, we've got Kyle Kazan from the great state of California. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Well, I'm fantastic, and I was wondering maybe if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your background in law enforcement before we start getting to the subject of legalization.
Sure. I was a police officer for 5 years in the city of Torrance, California, which is the sixth largest city in Los Angeles County. And I was a drug warrior. I'm a drug recognition evaluator, court certified. I'm also a gang expert. And 2 different 6-month periods, I led the department in felony and misdemeanor arrests. So I was hooking and booking, and most of what I was doing was fighting the drug war, and that included cannabis.
Wow, so it sounds like you were good at what you did. At what point in this odyssey of yours did you recognize the futility of what's happening in the drug war?
You know, one of the things, when you're that's a great question. When you're a police officer, they call it making your bones, and which means getting a reputation as a good cop. And Torrance has a reputation of being an aggressive department where they're out there patrolling and looking to find, people before they steal a car and you're chasing it. Hopefully you can catch them a little early. And so I was head down focused on being the best police officer I could, which means getting statistics. But towards the end of my, 3-4 years, I had informants. I got to know them. They became friends. They would ask me, "Hey, Kyle, can you take me to drug treatment?" I'm like, I got jail. We don't. We have a pretty draconian way of dealing with the drug war, and so towards the end, it was just I slowed down my arrests, and I just felt like, we're just processing people through courts. It's just a game that we're not winning, and it's an unwinnable war. And then after I left police work and had my own company, took a business approach. I was introduced to law enforcement against prohibition, and I'm a libertarian, registered libertarian, so I take a little bit outside the box already. And when I heard what they had to say, I said, that's exactly right. And when I saw the statistics that backed it up, I'm like, you know what? We really must go a different direction.
So did you find then in policing, in the police force, that there was this kind of, I don't know if it's a divide, but you'd have, say, some of the officers who are new enough that they're all dedicated and gung-ho for the drug war, and then the older officers with some experience that got to where you were, where they're kind of disenfranchised from it. It doesn't really see it working. And does that cause a conflict within the forces between the gung-hos and the kind of the jaded?
Yeah, another good question. I hadn't thought about it that way. What I would say is you have the young pups that are going to try and prove to the old dogs that, hey, I am a good police officer. I'm worthy of being out here. I'm worthy of respect. And, I'm not just going to get a cup of coffee and kind of just wait for my radio calls. I'm out here looking to protect my community. They're going to enforce laws on the books. And so, but I will tell you, old dogs and some young pups came up to me as it became clear several years ago when I was on CNN and Fox News, and that publicly that I am opposed to drug war and pro legalization of all drugs, but right now marijuana is the hot button here in California. A lot of people took me aside and thanked me and said they're on board and they hope the laws get changed. It's just not their job. A few people, old dogs and young pups, looked at me as a bit of a heretic.
Yeah, I can imagine. We're speaking with Kyle Kazan, a former Torrance police officer in California with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And a quick reminder, if you're looking for a great speaker in your neck of the woods to talk about this with the authority of a background in law enforcement Against Prohibition has a ton of speakers. Just look up leap.cc, LEAP.cc, and you can find them. So Kyle, I'm also curious. You'd mentioned in your background that you were a gang expert. You worked on gang task forces. And one of the things we hear from the people that are resisting marijuana legalization is, marijuana is not a big part of the gangs anyway, and they'll just move on to harder drugs and kidnappings and other sorts of crime. Do you think that legalizing marijuana is going to have an effect on the gang situation in Southern California?
It already has. I mean, it's not fully legal, recreational, and right now there's a bit of a game that has to be played where you go to a doctor. So if you want to just recreationally use it, you have to play a game. But the fact that you can go to a place that's regulated most of the time, most of the pot shops are regulated and dispensaries. It has cut way down on, my company manages apartment complexes, and we still have some drug dealing out of it, which is never safe for anybody. But pot, that's not really. I mean, that's a lot safer now, and will be a lot safer should the ballot initiative pass in November.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you mentioned that. The Adult Use of Marijuana Act looks as though it will make the ballot for November. And there are some out there that are complaining about it. They fear it's a takeover by billionaires or it's going to wreck medical marijuana. But in your estimation, what do you think are the positives of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act?
I haven't read the bill, but I can tell you almost anything compared to what we have here. I mean, I did read, I forgot what Indiana's, which I thought was a little bit silly. What I have read of this, and I haven't read the whole thing, it looks pretty okay, and it is kind of protecting the smaller the smaller grower. But again, we're still arresting people. We're still using the county crime labs to test the green leafy substance that are being booked in on even infractions now. So we're still using incredible resources because cannabis is not legalized and totally regulated.
Yeah, you make a good point, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, California's got medical and California's decrim up to an ounce, so why bother? But you make that point that they still have to test the green leafy substance.
Well, let me be clear. One thing that I say when I go out and I speak, and whether it's, whether your bent is more liberal, whether your bent's more conservative or moderate, it's the same thing. You'll be outraged. Particularly, I found women when I use this analogy, and I say, you go anywhere in the state of California, and two officers An officer goes up and they write a ticket for marijuana. They don't have a card, what have you. They book it, and because you have a right to a speedy trial, they've got to get that into the crime lab, and so it goes into, down here, be the LA County Crime Lab. 2 hours later, there's a rape in that same, call it a parking lot, and the good officers take the person to the hospital. They perform what's known as a rape kit, and they book in the physical sample into the LA County Crime Lab, looking for a DNA check. Right now in California or in LA County, it's that part of the process is averaging 2 years. So for 2 years, you're sitting on something that you could quickly identify potentially, and this happens regularly often, a named suspect to go take off the street and not wait 2 years where you can continue to victimize people, all because we're tying up our crime lab with cannabis and just utter nonsense.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Now, we're looking, like you said, the hot button issue right now is legalization of marijuana. But you mentioned your apartment complexes, and there's still drug dealing going on there. And a lot of us are advocating that, look, we need to legalize all drugs so we can take those drug dealers out of the apartment complex. But when you look at the polls, people are about 56% for marijuana. They're no higher than 10% for any other drug. What would you say to convince the people that are okay with marijuana legalization that they need to start thinking about other drug legalization?
I would say go to the leap.cc website, look at some of the statistics, or look at the statistics, and I don't think you'd find anybody advocating for drugs, like drug use, like, hey, you should go out and try heroin. I think what you'll find, and my fellow LEAP speakers and I are saying, there's an inevitability that people are going to get their hands on drugs. And so do we take a pragmatic approach? Do we take a look at what causes the least amount of harm? And can we educate a free populace to make good decisions for them? And even if you say, well, I still don't know, it's like, okay, do you want police officers to put on their badge and their gun and go out each night to try and stop you from harming you? And I'm not talking about driving while under the influence, which I think you should be taken to jail every night, every day that someone wants to do that. I'm just talking about you're ingesting something that's not good for you. Do you want the police to be arresting you and using up precious resources for that?
Very good point. And there's so many other things out there that are bad for us that we ingest. We don't have cops pulling us over for Big Macs and Slurpees.
You know what? That's the natural slippery slope, right? If you're willing to save somebody from themselves, where do you stop?
Right, exactly. So, Kyle, before we let you go here, I know you've got to get to a meeting pretty quick. Do you have any contact information if people would like to get in touch with you or have you speak somewhere there in Southern California?
Always happy to speak. I'm a pretty busy guy, like some of my other fellow LEAP speakers, and that's where we kind of work in concert with each other. And I like to think I'm the best LEAP speaker, but I've heard these other people speak, and I'm sure you've talked to Jim Gray, Steve Downing, Diane Goldstein. They're fantastic. So if you just go to the leap.cc website and just make a request, they get it right to us. Just like today, I was booked early this morning. And so if we can respond quickly, and I certainly will, and would love to meet and discuss this, particularly with people that are either on the fence or against legalization of drugs. Be happy to have a nice debate about it.
All right. Kyle Kazan from Torrance, California. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Russ Belville Show. We appreciate your service, and good luck with this Adult Use of Marijuana Act getting on the ballot.
Thank you for having me, Russ. Bye.
All right. That's our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment. We feature former law enforcement every other Thursday here on the Russ Belville Show, and we've got a large archive of LEAP speaker interviews as well that we'll be putting forth in our upcoming Radical Russ VIP program. That's right, we're still getting it developed, but soon your VIP membership will give you access to over 5 years worth of prior interviews and segments. Do your cannabis research with the Russ Belville Show. We'll help you every way we can. We're back with a Radical Rant in 2 minutes.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Being green is good. Growing green is good. Making green is great. CannabisRadio.com.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
Educator, author, and advocate Dr. Mitch Earlywine is here to tackle the burning issues.
And I'm here to clear up the myths about cannabis and burn them away with science.
CannabisRadio.com presents a no-holds-barred platform that seeks to redefine and revolutionize the entire scope of the cannabis culture while opening the door for more to join the cannabis crusade.
Dr. Kevin Hill.
You can't ignore the fact that, like alcohol, most people who use don't have a problem. So I think that you need to think about policy in that way while educating people properly about marijuana. I think that's the way to go.
Burning Issues, only on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis business boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis business needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant. Well, the good news coming out of California is that the Adult Use of Marijuana Act has secured more than 600,000 signatures. They needed 365,000. They've gotten 600,000 signatures. It's May 5th. Their deadline was July 5th. Or was it June 5th? I forget what the story said. I think I said July 5th. Let me make sure. I don't want to misstate that. Yeah, July 5th. Okay, so, yeah. So 2 months early. And 600,000 signatures. Isn't it amazing what professional organization, well-polling language, and money can do for your legalization drive? Seems it was rather easy for them to come up with $600,000 when Sean Parker is donating $1 million and DPA and MPP are ponying up $500,000 each and someone else is ponying up $250,000 here and there. You can actually get stuff done. Isn't that remarkable? Now, the reason I go off on this a little sarcastically is because since 2010, California has gone without marijuana legalization and without any credible attempt to pass marijuana legalization. Now, 2010, of course, Prop 19 failed with 46 or 7% of the vote, somewhere in that range. And back then in 2010, we heard all these excuses from who should be natural supporters of marijuana legalization, cannabis consumers and cannabis growers, who opposed Prop 19. We had dispensary owners that were putting flyers in every bag of marijuana they sold, telling their patients, telling their customers to oppose Prop 19, weaving tales of how expensive marijuana was going to become after legalization and how there'd be no more medical marijuana and it'd all be monopolized by Richard Lee and the Oaksterdam cartel. We heard so many of these scare stories in 2010, and they worked. They managed to convince most of the people in the Emerald Triangle to vote against it, as well as other natural pot smokers. You fast forward to 2012, and Colorado and Washington and Oregon get marijuana legalization on the ballot, but there was no legalization on the ballot in California, despite the fact that the people who were against Prop 19, the no on Prop 19 people, said over and over and over that we'll do something better in 2012. We don't need to pass Prop 19 in 2010. We'll do something better in 2012. And nothing happened. Because these groups, many of them, all splintered into different factions that had their own version of legalization that was true. The Jack Herer Initiative, the perennial Jack Herer Initiative that always has well-meaning people behind it, that actually proposes the legalization I would favor the most. 12 pounds of possession, 99 plants, taxes capped at, $10 an ounce, something like that, all the pot prisoners set free. I'm for all those things. But what I'm really for is for the legalization that gets on the ballot and passes. I've told people many times the Russ Belville legalization would be age 18, unlimited possession, unlimited cultivation, no limits on purchases, no limits on sales, and Jack Herer's birthday replaces Columbus Day. But I don't have $20 million to get it on the ballot. And neither did CCHI have the money to get it on the ballot. Neither did MCLR have the money to get it on the ballot. Neither did any number of these groups that kept promising they would get better legalization on the ballot in 2012 and in 2014, and they failed to do it. And over those 6 years, since Prop 19 failed, every single year has meant more tickets for marijuana, more arrests for cannabis cultivation. And as our guest in Cops Say Legalize Drugs told us earlier, every one of those tickets involves seizing the marijuana and taking it to a crime lab to make sure that it is marijuana, because you have to prove it in court. And that takes a crime lab away from working on a rape kit, which, as our guest told us, there is a 2-year wait. How many rapists have run around free in the past 6 years since California didn't pass Prop 19? And I'm sorry, my patience for the hippy-dippy sun and light, all grassroots, perfect true legalization, open source bullshit has come to an end. It was cute in the 1990s. It was cute in the 80s and the 70s. It was even cute in the early 2000s. It was adorable. This idea that with no money, we could come in and change the world. And this is not to say that grassroots movements can't be successful. On the contrary, in Michigan right now, MI Legalize is working on a legalization initiative. They've collected hundreds of thousands of signatures. They don't have any support from the top drug war groups. They're funding this as a grassroots initiative, and they're actually making progress because they've got language that polls well, doesn't overreach, and professionals behind it. So I'm not trying to say that the grassroots can't do it. And by God, if Bernie Sanders has shown us anything this campaign season, it's that a well-motivated, well-expanded and networked small dollar operation can do wonders. But my problem with California is the grassroots never even got that far. The grassroots could never even get their shit together enough to try to mount a serious grassroots campaign. The fact that there were 4 different groups other than the Adult Use of Marijuana Act group is evidence enough. If all of those groups had banded together to try to focus on one piece of language, maybe they've got a shot. But in a state as big and expensive as California, that's the only way they had a shot. 4 separate groups had no chance in hell. So now that the Adult Use of Marijuana Act has its 600,000 signatures, has the backing of the Lieutenant Governor of the Lieutenant Governor of California, the President of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Drug Policy Alliance, Marijuana Policy Project, and NORML, it is time to end the fantasies that there's going to be some magic bullet grassroots effort that brings perfect true legalization this year. It's time to stop with the endless Facebook memes and bashing of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. It's time to put the fantasy that the Adult Use of Marijuana Act is some sort of billionaire takeover that's going to destroy medical marijuana and make marijuana super expensive. That sort of thinking needs to go into the same bin as the chemtrails and the anti-vaxxers and the climate change deniers. It's fantasy. It's not true. The evidence we've seen from Washington State and Colorado have shown that the price of cannabis declines precipitously after legalization. With California having the world's largest production market in cannabis, there's no doubt that the price is going to drop substantially after California legalizes, and especially when we have the possibility of looking at an entire West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, and possibly also the Southwest, Nevada and Arizona. We could have that whole Western block, about 25% of the landmass of this great country, as a legal marijuana production zone. And the competition that you're going to start to see between California and Oregon and Washington and Arizona and Nevada on their tax rates, on the license fees to start a business, as they want to start to attract other entrepreneurs. This competition is going to drive down the cost of entry into the market as well as the prices of marijuana. And for those who are afraid that the Adult Use of Marijuana Act is somehow going to destroy medical marijuana, let's keep in mind that throughout great swaths of the state of California, medical marijuana is severely restricted or banned as it is. Now, some of the critics are saying, well, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act still lets them ban. Okay, so you're telling me it doesn't get any worse than it is right now. But everybody will be able to grow 6 plants indoors. No city, no county can ban that. So at the bare minimum, the patients in Fresno and other places that have banned all medical cultivation are getting the gift of 6 plant indoor cultivation now. They're getting that bonus. Also currently under medical marijuana in the state of California, Child Protective Services can take your kids away if they think that you're creating an unsafe hazard for them. If someone complains about your marijuana use, that can be used against you to take your kids. After the Adult Use of Marijuana Act passes, that is no longer possible. Medical marijuana patients' parental rights are protected by this act. I know that people want true legalization. I know they want it to be as legal or more legal than alcohol. Nobody tells us how much alcohol we can buy at the store. We have a limit of home brewing 100 or 200 gallons of beer, depending on which state you're in. And that's nowhere near analogous to just 6 plants. I understand that feeling of wanting more. But you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this situation. You have to recognize that the Adult Use of Marijuana Act in California, passing legalization in California, ends the drug war. It's more than just California. Passing it in California means we begin to pass it in other states, in the Texases and North Dakotas and Kentuckys and all these other states that can never, ever have a shot at legalizing until California proves that the sky doesn't fall, the world doesn't come to an end, everything's just fine with legal marijuana. All right, that's all the time we got for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us here live from Hollywood, Florida. Take a break and hit around the top of the hour. We'll go into Toker Talk Radio, taking your calls at 971-533-7111. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.